want America to know what about ICE right now, today, and moving forward?
Here's why I'm sick and tired of reading stories that ICE is going to raid your school, they're going to raid your churches, they're doing neighborhood sweeps. People need to understand everybody that ICE arrests is based on a targeted enforcement operation, which means they know who they're going to arrest. They have a pretty good idea where they're going. They have to draw up an operational plan. So it's not neighborhood sweeps. We're not going through neighborhoods looking for people different than us. And ICE should not have a different set of rules. We'll go into schools, arrest a public safety threat, significant public safety threat. Churches, we'll never raid a church, but if we know there's a national security threat we know is in a church right now that we're looking for, we know he's sitting there right now, we'll go and arrest that person. Doesn't mean we're raiding schools, doesn't mean we're raiding churches, we're not raiding hospitals, which I see a lot of left media saying it. They're scaring the immigrant community. I want people to go to school. We want people to go see their doctor and go to hospital, go to church.
This might be the best Tom Homan interview you will see. Now, it's not the most combative, it's not the most clickbaity or adversarial, because Stephen A. Smith right here, a sports reporter, ESPN's main guy, actually asks some great questions to Tom Homan, and you get a greater sense of what's going on behind the scenes from Tom Homan, and I think it'll be refreshing. It's Sean Daniel here. I am finally back after a month of not making videos. I was on a big trip in the Philippines, going around different islands. It was awesome. I saw some amazing things. But now I really want to get back into videos, even though I'm in a hostel bed in Asia still. Let's get it going.
I mentioned that Donald Trump had appointed you as acting director of ICE in 2017, but you retired in 2018. What happened then? And why are you back now? Because you stepped away, but obviously you came back. You served over 30 years. I mean, you've given your service and what have you, and you could have retired and went out into the sunset, but you came back. Why did you feel compelled to do so? So please share that with my audience.
Well, it's the second time I came back out of retirement from President Trump. Didn't make my wife real happy, but how do you not come back? I mean, under the last 4 years, I wake up every day upset over the last 4 years because we had the most secure border in my lifetime. And I've done this since, as you said, 1984. It's the most secure border in my lifetime. The numbers proved it. And what the last administration did when they opened the border up, I knew every day when I woke up, more women and children are being sex trafficked across an open border. More Americans would die from fentanyl overdoses, poisonings because of an open border. Sex trafficking in women and children would increase on an open border. And more no-inspected terrorists and people on the watch list would get into the country through an open border. So, I was insulted that President Biden took the most secure border in my lifetime and unsecured it on purpose. And I mean that. Look, I worked for 6 presidents starting with Ronald Reagan. Every president I worked for, including Obama and Clinton, took steps to secure the border because they clearly understood you can't have national security if you don't have border security. President Biden is the first president in history of this nation who came in unsecured the border. So it upset me because I knew every day someone's going to die crossing that border. Women are going to be sexually assaulted crossing that border. So when President Trump called me, he asked me if I'd be willing to come back and help fix that border. I didn't hesitate. I came back because I think it's the right thing to do.
You've worked, obviously, doing what you've done. It spanned decades, so obviously one could easily surmise you have a lot of intel. You have a lot of access to information that the average American citizen may not know or what have you. Let me ask you this, and I don't mean to ask it politically, but I'm asking it this way. Have you received any kind of explanation as to why former President Biden literally went against what former President Barack Obama did during his presidency? And the numbers show he actually deported more immigrants out of this country than Trump did. Yet Biden comes into office in 2020, and he went completely against what Obama had done. You ever received intel explanation as to why he did that?
That's a great question. You're the first ones to ask me that question, right? Now, I surmise, I have an opinion that I think this administration thought these millions of people are going to be future Democratic voters. But one of the things Biden also did, in addition to destroying all the programs we put in place to give us the most secure border, he overturned the Trump census rule, which means millions of people they release in sanctuary cities will be counted in the next census, which is going to result in what? More seats in House for the damned. So I truly believe they saw a future political benefit from this. But you're exactly right. And I've said this. Why do I think he did it on purpose? Because Joe Biden was vice president under Barack Obama when he had those record removals. Alejandro Mayorkas was a deputy secretary under Obama when he had those removals. And we had we had thousands of families coming across the border every day. How did we stop it? We built family residential centers. We held them long enough to see a judge. 90% lost a case, 90%. So we put them in an airplane, sent them home, border numbers tanked. So both those men knew how we solved that crisis. When they came back in, as now the secretary and the president, what did they do? The complete opposite. They didn't detain, they released. They didn't make them see a judge, and they weren't removing them. So they did a complete opposite of what they knew worked under President Obama.
Wow.
That's something that I've heard before about the census thing, and it's something that really gets overlooked. It's not just that they want more voters in their area, in these sanctuary state areas, because they don't need more voters. They're already a blue state. They don't have any competition against Republicans. But when they change that census rule, it gives them more population and therefore more seats in the House to give them therefore more power with federal laws that get passed. And do we think that Tom Homan has received real intel on this? Yes, of course he has. Of course he has. He can't necessarily say that. He can just share the opinion of what he believes.
Ask you this though, because you mentioned children on several of your answers already, and I know you mentioned you're trying to find children that were separated from their parents. How does that process work actually? How do you go about the business of finding, children that have been separated from their parents?
Well, look, and I'll be honest with you, I've been honest from day one. That is going to be the hardest out of the three goals that I have. That is going to be the hardest, and for obvious reasons. 500,000 children, more than 500,000 children were smuggled in the country, separated from their parents, put in the hands of criminal cartels to be brought in this country legally. And, you and I, we leave our child in a car in the middle of summer, we'll get arrested. But these 500,000 children were put in the hands of criminal cartels, released into the country by the last administration. The last administration was concerned about one thing: optics. So the instructions to ORR, which is Division HHS, was to process release as quickly as you can, because if there's no overcrowding, we can say the border's secure, nothing to see here, right? Even the secretary of HHS, Becerra, he on stage several times, he was bragging how quickly they release these children to so-called sponsors.'s the problem: they didn't vet these sponsors appropriately. Under the Trump administration, we did DNA testing. We not only vetted the sponsor, we vetted everybody in that household to make sure there wasn't a child predator in that household, make sure there wasn't a gang member in that household. We took a lot of steps to make sure these children are going to be safe when they're sent to the sponsors. Under this administration, the whistleblowers at HHS has made it clear many of these sponsors weren't fingerprinted, many of them, they weren't run through record checks, and many of the identification they provided was not assured that it was legitimate identification. So here's the issue now. We got 300,000 children we need to find. And there's a way to find you and me, Stephen. We have a footprint. We have a digital footprint. We own homes, okay. We own cars, we pay bills, we got loans, and we got utility bills, whatever. They can find us. But a child don't have that digital footprint, which means we got to use the digital footprint of the sponsors and what information they provided. And we know a lot of the information is fraudulent. So it's going to be a difficult job. I can tell you right now, we'll find some of these children, and not every one of these children are in harm's way. Many of them won't find they're with their parents, but many of them are not. Based on my 4 decades of doing this, many of these children are going to be in forced labor. We already found many in forced labor. Some are going to be in sexual slavery. And so we need to find these children and save them, but that's the hardest part about this job, because of the data that we have is not the best data in the world, but we're not going to give up. President Trump's committed, do everything we can to find these children.
The Biden administration, the Democrats in power who want to keep their power by allowing these illegals in, they are willing to sacrifice the quality of life of children in order to keep their votes, in order to get more power. Now that's known throughout all politicians, especially the ones that are willing to send people to war in order to keep the military-industrial complex running, keeping the lobbyists giving them money. They're willing to basically sacrifice the lives of Americans for their benefit. Well, the Democrats, you realize, to keep more power, have more illegals come in, have these illegals bring down the quality of our lives as Americans in America, they're willing to do all that, plus have kids' lives be ruined, sent into sex slavery, possibly forced labor. That's the degree to which people love power, Republicans and Democrats. But in this case, with the illegal votes thing, Democrats. It's pretty eye-opening.
Let me get back to you with this question, too, though. You're considered one of the masterminds of the first Trump administration's infamous zero tolerance policy, which led to the separation of thousands of migrant children from their parents in the eyes of many, at the very least. The idea led to the separation of more than, I think, 4,000 children from their parents, and some were lamenting that some of them were put in cages. How do you answer these questions? For those that don't know, how do you answer questions like that, like I just posed to you, in terms of 4,000 children being separated from their parents?
Absolutely. So where did zero tolerance come from? Zero tolerance came from this. 31% of women that make that journey get raped by the criminal cartels. Children were dying on that border every day. Dying. Either drowning in a river, dying making that journey. Children were sexually assaulted, and children were dying in the desert. You know, they made that journey, and a lot of women and children not only died, many were sexually assaulted. So we said, look, how can we save lives? How can we stop the sexual assault of children? So we said, look, let's prosecute them, because it's a crime to enter this country illegally. So if we prosecute them and put them in jail, maybe the numbers go down, maybe less will come. And it worked. Zero tolerance, the numbers of families putting themselves in harm's way and putting themselves in the hands of criminal cartels dropped significantly. However, the sad part about it, the unfortunate part about it, is that when you prosecute a parent and put them in jail, the child won't go with them. And I'll say this, I started as a police officer in New York. Police agencies across this country separate families 1,000 times a day across this country because the child doesn't go to jail with the parent. And I've said during my testimony, and one time I was testifying at Hill, when I was a cop in New York, when I went to domestic violence call and I arrested the father, I separated that family. Child can't go to jail with him. When I arrested a DUI and he had a child in the car, I separated that family. It's an unfortunate and saddest part of law enforcement. Families get separated when the parents get arrested. So we do let the families 1,000 times a day in this country with Americans, but they want a different set of rules for illegal aliens. But the whole intent of doing this was to save lives with less sexual assaults on women and children. That was the whole purpose for it. But they keep harping on that Trump's family separation policy, but and you're right, about 4,000, but they don't talk about the 500,000, 500,000 separations that this administration was responsible for, because they sent a message to the whole world. If you're a child and you cross this country illegally, you're not going to be deported. We'll deliver you to the very same people who paid a criminal cartel to smuggle you into this country. So, you know, what we did was try to save lives and decrease sexual assaults. What they did was send a message to the whole world. Child can cross the border. We'll get them to the final destination at government expense and reward the people who paid the criminal cartels. Bring them, and that's why the numbers exploded, because there's no consequence. We had a consequence, they didn't.
You see how smart and aware and up to date you have to be with things in order to see the truth? Because everywhere you look online, media, TV, you'll hear about the child separation and how bad it was, bad it was, bad it was. When the reality of it is that you always, like Tom said, you always separate families when a crime is committed. So therefore, when you break the law and enter the country illegally and get detained, you're breaking the law and getting arrested, just like when you kidnap somebody, steal something, hurt somebody really bad. They don't arrest the child, they separate him from the parent who's committing the crime. You have to stay so sharp, even me, because it's been thrown down my throat about the child separation. It's so inhumane. These Border Patrol agents and other people that have pushed to maybe get this law in place, they don't do it without reason. People think there's just racist policies in America. Are you kidding me? You got to remember, there are big reasons why these things get put in place. Sometimes it's for politicians' own gain. Sometimes it's to think through how to avoid more problems like this. You have to be so sharp.
An incredibly compelling answer that you just gave. I can't refute it. No one should, as far as I'm concerned, sir. But I would ask you this, because whether it's optics or it's a reality, listening to what you said, how sensitive you are to these issues, what one would argue diametrically opposes that is when we see one story, and granted, it's one individual, but it's still a 10-year-old in Texas who's a U.S. citizen being deported to Mexico, suffering from brain cancer. You've seen that story plastered all over the news wires over the last couple of days. How do you explain your mode of thinking and your explanation about why you do what you do and why you're committed to doing what you're doing, which is pretty damn close to irrefutable, I might add. But then we see a case like that happening. How do you
Well,
juxtapose that?
look, you and I are on the same page. Actually, I've been on travel the last couple of days. I saw that story on my way to work this morning. I read that story, and what did I do? I immediately contacted the office of the Board of Patrol and I said, I want facts on this case. Because many times the facts are different from what you read in the media, but I've already inquired about it. What happened here? What's the ground truth here? So I'm looking into it. I read that story this morning. I know I'm a day behind, but I get hundreds of phone calls, hundreds of texts. I have a lot of meetings. I'm on an airplane all the time, but I've asked this morning because we want to make sure. Look, I've been honest from the beginning. We want to be transparent American people. If we screw up, we didn't know we screw up. If we do something, so I've already asked that question. I don't have the facts on it yet. I've asked for facts, ground truth on that, and I'll deal with it once I get the facts up on the ground from what actually happened. Because many times what you read in the media, they leave half the story out. Sometimes they don't. But I'm going to find out.
Well, I appreciate that answer. And that's very honest and stand up for you. Thank you for saying that. Are you saying that you don't know all the facts yet? And if you do find out that this 10-year-old child was indeed a United States citizen, that you will make sure that child is not deported?
I'll make sure I get all the facts and make a decision based on the facts. I can't tell you what I'm going to do yet. The facts could be 1,000 different ways, right? But are the parents a public safety threat? Are they national security threat? They can't be here. And so we got to find out what the facts are, but we'll make a decision that is the most humanitarian thing we can do.
Great answer by Tom. And it just shows you, if you think, how fast the media is to leave out certain details, to frame something in a certain way. And all politicians do it if you really pay attention. To demonize and bring down one of their political enemies in order to frame the story in a certain way so it brings certain light to certain things. That's a great answer by Tom Homan right there, because we know we do not really trust what the media has to say, especially when they take one case to try to point out that, oh, Trump's deportations are bad.
Let me switch to sanctuary cities, because obviously I've seen you, and I shouldn't say this. It's actually bad for me to say this on camera, but I haven't minded you at all, going at elected officials and law enforcement officials and letting them know that they were going to be accountable if they didn't follow the law. Didn't bother me at all to see that from you, but I am wondering, what are your future plans for sanctuary cities, and do you see a legal solution to sanctuary cities in this country?
I actually do. We're working on some things right now. I don't want to share it here on this podcast because it's law enforcement sensitive. We're working on some things now, but I can say this. Sanctuary cities are sanctuary for criminals. And we're going to hold them accountable. And Pam Bondi, now that she's the Attorney General, she's already filed lawsuits. And we're going to continue filing lawsuits because we think knowingly releasing a public safety threat back into the public is just dumb. There's no reason. In fact, when you release a public safety threat back in the public, it puts our officers at great risk, because rather than arresting somebody in the safety and security of county jail, now we got to go to the neighborhood and find them, which is dangerous for the officer, dangerous for the alien, because anything can happen on a street arrest, and it's certainly dangerous for the community. So we want to make, in sanctuary cities, they don't understand, they're hurting themselves, because when you don't give us access to the bad guy locked in a jail cell, which is safe for everybody, you release them to the community, you're going to get exactly what you don't want. You're going to put the public at greater risk of crime, because many will commit another crime. And what you're going to force ICE in the community, and we'll find the bad guy, but when we find him, he's probably with others that aren't a criminal threat, but they're in the country illegally. Well, they're going to go to, because we're not going to turn our back on illegal alien. Once we find it, we're going to let ICE do their job and enforce immigration law. So what you get being a sanctuary city is exactly what you don't want: more officers in the community and more collateral arrest, because we found them while we're looking for the bad guy. So we want the sanctuary cities to do one thing: let us end the jail. Let us talk to the person that you locked in a jail cell, because obviously the public safety threat. Give us access to that person. It's safer for everybody. It's the right thing to do. And the message from sanctuary cities is this, which is a bunch of crap. Well, we're a sanctuary city. We're welcoming jurisdiction because we want illegal aliens to feel safe when they want to report crimes or they're victim of crime, to come to us for help. without the fear we're working with ICE. That is so false because number one, we don't want to talk to the victim witness. We want to talk to the guy you locked in a jail cell. And if you go talk to the victim and witness and ask him, do you want the bad guy released back in your neighborhood? The victim and witness don't want him back either. So let us get access to the person locked in that taxpayer-funded jail to help drive crime down the neighborhood and make it safe for officers, alien in the community. It just makes sense to me as a career cop. I don't understand why any elected official whose number one responsibility is protection of their community, why would you not work with us to remove a child rapist from the community rather than release them back in the community?
Stephen A. has no rebuttal to that. That's got to be the greatest quotes we can have just for campaigning. Releasing a public safety threat back into the community is just dumb. The messaging coming from sanctuary cities is just crap. That would resonate with so many voters. More than just this convoluted, super breakdown logic thing that usually happens. It's the simplistic messaging like that because we agree with it. It's totally obvious. Don't release him back into the jail. Like, we all know this, but I love the simplistic messaging because it's so rare. You watch so many news stations and there's this detailed breakdown, explanation, talking points, why this is bad, why this is good, and it's like, just simple common sense. I think that could have a way more impact.
I got about 3 more questions for you because I know your time is precious and I really appreciate you giving me this time. Prior to the election, you pledged to conduct the largest deportation in American history. Now, there's more than 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States. Where do we stand today in terms of identifying those individuals and deporting them out of the country?
Great question, because I read a media story this morning. We're deporting less people than Joe Biden. Yeah, because Joe Biden had millions of people coming across the border every year, and a lot of border patrols are removing a lot of them. So you can't compare the administration. It isn't how many removed. It's number one, how many did you release into the country illegally? And Biden administration is in the millions. And the more important question is, how many interior arrests, people in the interior country did you arrest? If you look at those numbers, we're about 3 times higher than Joe Biden was during the same time period. We got about 36,000 arrests so far, vast majority of criminals, because President Trump has promised American people on this mass deportation operation, the worst first, the criminals first, because they're the biggest danger to our communities. National security threats, public safety threats, that's what we're concentrating on. But that aperture will open to the 1.4 million that had due process at great taxpayer expense, were ordered removed, but instead of leaving, they became a fugitive. That aperture will open up. So you can see the rest increased in the very near future. But the problem is sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities are making us less efficient. Well, rather than one agent arresting one bad guy in the jail, now we got to send a whole team into the neighborhood for officer safety reasons to find somebody that don't want to be found. So that's slowing us up. But what we'll do, we'll double the man force of sanctuary cities. We'll double the teams. We're not going to be stopped. And we'll overcome all the roadblocks we're putting in, but we're going to get it done.
It's so smart because Tom Homan and Trump have said that they want to have huge deportations, the biggest in U.S. history. Well, how can you limit it if you're a Democrat and you don't want Trump to have a big win in the public? Continue the sanctuary city thing. Do not budge at all on sanctuary cities so that it's way harder for them to find the illegals and then deport them. Behind the scenes, you think the sanctuary city thing is going to go anywhere? Heck no. They're going to keep that, fight that, keep it alive, and just solely in order for Trump to not be able to get his deportation numbers up. Because that's where all the illegals are. If that's where you can get the best treatment as an illegal, be safe from being deported, that's where I'm going to go. So therefore, to get more deportation numbers higher, you have to go to where the illegals are, and where they are is mostly sanctuary cities. But the sanctuary cities keep them safe, so the Democrats are going to keep the sanctuary city policy going so that the deportation numbers do not go up, so there is no win for Trump.
But you're talking about in Guantanamo Bay, for example, there's tens of thousands of available space, but there are millions of immigrants in this country illegally. So I'm saying if you're successful from a deportation standpoint in terms of locating who those individuals are, there's only but so much room in Guantanamo Bay. Where else are they going to go? What are you going to do with them?
Another great question. I've been on media for the last 2 weeks. Congress needs to fund this operation. We need money because you're right. Every illegal alien we arrest, we need a bed for. Our bed's almost full right now. So we need money So we can do what the American people voted for. The number one issue was illegal immigration, removing criminal aliens. So Congress needs to come and give us the funding to do this. We need to buy more beds. We need to have more out of country planes. We need more contracts to have more contract people come in and do the work that doesn't require law enforcement, law enforcement's currently doing. So you're exactly right. Congress needs to come through. I'm hoping they sign a bill today or hopefully tonight. We need a bill right now, but we need reconciliation. We need money to be successful, because the more money we have, the more successful we're going to be.
I got to admit, Mr. Homan, that should be the easiest part of your job. I mean, the president has all three branches of government in his favor. I mean, the GOP has that, the White House, the Senate, the House. I mean, it shouldn't be difficult at this particular moment in time for them to give you what you want, since they assigned you to do this job. But I want to transition real quick to undocumented workers. So a lot of people argue, they've had a massive economic benefit. They've been a massive economic benefit to this country. They pay taxes, are important to the workforce, are less violent than some naturalized citizens. That's the things that you keep hearing people say. What role does that play in your thinking when it comes to issues of deportation?
Look, if you're in the country illegally, you got a problem. It's not okay to be here illegally. But as you know, we're prioritizing worst of the worst fugitives. And here's the issue. I'll use one example, and this is a true example. I had a new roof put on my house 2 years ago. I had to call 6 companies before I got a company that guaranteed me a legal workforce. And one person that showed up was a father and son. Father and son used to have 20 United States citizen employees. But him and his son came by and said, can I just repair the roof? Do we need to replace the roof? Because him and his son can't replace the whole roof. Here's a story he told me. He had to fire 20 U.S. citizen employees because he was competing against all these companies that had illegal aliens, paying them, $7 an hour to get on the roof. Well, he was paying U.S. citizens $20 to get on the roof. People need to understand that no one hires an illegal alien on the goodness of their heart. So Harman can pay them less, work them further, work them harder, and undercut their competition as U.S. citizen employees. Now, I'll say this: if we need that type of staff to come to this country and work, then it's up to Congress to make the changes. But we can't condone hiring illegal aliens, because that's what drives everything else. When you overwhelm the border patrol with what people call innocent immigration, just people coming here for a better life, people coming for a job, but what they need to understand, there's an ugly underbelly of that, because when you overwhelm the border patrol, you type border patrol up with what they call innocent immigration, it overwhelms the border patrol, which means there's less agents on the border to arrest people smuggling fentanyl. There's less people, agents on the border to stop the sex trafficking. What happened to Joe Biden? Joe Biden caused such a huge surge in illegal immigration. 70% of agents were pulled off the line to deal with this humanitarian crisis and deal with this so-called innocent illegal immigration. And when they did that, what happened, Steve? 600% increase in sex trafficking. We got 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl. We got a record number of people on terrorist watch lists across the border. So we got to do this legally. There are millions of people standing in line right now, taking their tests, paying their fees, doing the background investigation, come to the country the right way. They're sitting in the back seat because CIS is overwhelmed with fraudulent asylum claims. So I get it. If we need a workforce, need more workforce in the country, then create a legal program. They can come with a visa, so they don't have to pay a criminal cartel. They don't have to give their whole life savings to put themselves at risk with a criminal cartel and swim across the river and drown. So Congress needs to do some work, but we can't condone illegal immigration. We can't condone, go ahead and enter the country legally, and we're not going to be looking for it. We got to send the message to the whole world. There's a set of rules. There's a right way and a wrong way to come to the greatest nation on earth. Let's do things the right way. I got to look at legislative branch Congress to do that. But in the meantime, we can't okay illegal immigration, because it's going to result in more people dying, more women being raped, more cartels, making more money to come to flood this country with poisonous fentanyl.
Why should we make profitability more important than the law? Oh my God, the workforce is going to make prices go higher. I bet you if you ask most voters, if you tell them, hey, the price of your eggs, the price of your roof, the price of other things is going to go up a bit because we're going to get illegals out of here, and they're going to start, companies are going to charge more because they're paying more to their real workers. First of all, most people would be like, wow, that means there's more work opportunity for me because I'm not competing against illegals. But two, I imagine most people would be like, wow, at least the people that voted in this election that got Trump in office by having the bigger popular vote for him than for Kamala Harris, they would be like, sign me up, bro. If I got to pay $6 for eggs, if I got to pay more for my roof, As long as the illegals are out of here, I feel safe in New York City. I don't have a bunch of illegals at my Walmart only paying cash because they're illegals and they work under the table. Sign me up.
Very last question to you, sir. I give you the floor. You want America to know what about ICE right now, today, and moving forward?
Here's
That's
what
what yours.
I'm sick and tired of reading stories that ICE is going to raid your school. They're going to raid your churches. They're doing neighborhood sweeps. People need to understand everybody that ICE arrests is based on a targeted enforcement operation, which means they know who they're going to arrest. They have a pretty good idea where they're going. They have to draw up an operational plan. So it's not neighborhood sweeps. We're not going through neighborhoods looking for people different than us. And when we got away with the sense of location policy, we ended it. Why? Because we have to go to a high school and arrest an MS-13 member we know is there right now. He's a public safety threat. We need to go in that high school along with the local authorities and arrest that public safety threat. Doesn't mean we're going to raid the school. I mean, we're going to arrest the bad guy that's in the high school, the same as every other federal law enforcement agency, state law enforcement agency, local. They all do it. And ICE should not have a different set of rules. We'll go into schools, arrest a public safety threat, significant public safety threat. Churches, we'll never raid a church, but if we know there's a national security threat we know is in a church right now that we're looking for, we know he's sitting there right now, we'll go and arrest that person. Doesn't mean we're raiding schools. Doesn't mean we're raiding churches. We're not raiding hospitals, which I see a lot of left media saying it. They're scaring the immigrant community. I want people to go to school. We want people to go see their doctor and go to hospital, go to church. We got to straighten that narrative out. It's a left that are putting fear in the immigrant community. We are basing our operations right now on the worst of the worst criminals. So go to church, go get your medical care, send your children to school. We're not raiding those places. We're doing the same thing every law enforcement agency does. It's not sweeps, target enforcement operation, a lot of planning. We do this carefully. The agents are very professional. So I just wish the left would just state the truth on what we're exactly doing. Look at the data. As I just said, 36,000 arrests, vast majority of criminals. We're doing exactly what President Trump said we would do and that I said we would do. We're concentrating on worse first.
There's no left or right here. I'm center. I care about the damn truth. And as far as I'm concerned, I want you to know, first of all, you're welcome back on the show anytime. I would love to have you back on to get in more intensive conversations about this, even more so than we just did over this last 20 plus minutes. I thank you for your time. And please feel free. Anytime you've got something to say and you want to come back and you want to have a conversation, please know that you're welcome to come back on the show, sir. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
All right.
Stephen A. did a great job with all of these questions. Really giving him a platform, asking him questions that pushed him a bit, but also giving him props and acknowledging when he did see the value in what Tom said, and also giving him a targeted, open-ended question like this where he lets him have a platform. I think he did a great job. Hope you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed getting back into it. Finally, after a month seeing these videos, seeing a video, making a video, it feels good, and I was really, really impressed with this interview. It's SHOCKS here, and I will see you in the next one.